The secret energy behind lottery winners. They know the numbers. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that what looks like a lucky break is never an accident. It is a state of consciousness stepping out of hiding and into the open, showing itself in a check, a windfall, a door that opens without explanation. There is a verse, tucked into the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 9, verse 11, that most people read and quietly despair over. It says, "I returned, and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favour to men of skill, but time and chance happeneth to them all." And Florence Scovel Shinn would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? The writer is not saying life is cruel or random. He is saying something far more freeing. He is saying that effort alone was never the mechanism. Skill alone was never the mechanism. The swiftest runner does not always win, and the strongest arm does not always prevail. Something else is moving underneath the visible contest, something the ancient writer called time and chance. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this chance is not a lottery of the universe. It is a magnet of consciousness. It is drawn to a state the way water is drawn downhill. So if bread has not come to the wise and riches have not come to the skillful, it is because bread and riches were never chasing intelligence, they were chasing readiness. So before we open the keys, let us plant the true seed together. Say it with me. I am tuned to the frequency of my rightful supply. Good fortune is drawn to the state I hold. My word is my wand. Again, I am tuned to the frequency of my rightful supply. Good fortune is drawn to the state I hold. My word is my wand. If something in you just went quiet as you said that, if some old, tired part of you recognized the truth in it before your mind could argue back, then type the 2 words, "I am energy," in the comments below, and let those 3 words be your seal, your small, quiet yes to the flow that has already begun to move toward you. The first key is this: luck is not an accident. It is an alignment. You have watched 2 people buy the exact same ticket, walk into the exact same room, and one is met with a door swinging open while the other meets a wall. It is not that heaven favoured one and forgot the other. It is that one carried a state of expectancy and the other carried a state of anxious grasping. Think of the woman at the corner store who buys her ticket quickly, muttering that she never wins anything, and the woman behind her who buys the same ticket, folds it gently, tucks it away like something already precious, and walks out humming before a single number is drawn. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that good fortune is simply the outer evidence of an inner condition already settled. It is not that the fortunate one got lucky, it is that she was already living in the feeling of having before the having arrived. This plays out everywhere, in the job that falls into someone's lap, the parking space that opens right on time, the check that comes the day the bill is due. None of it chance, only consciousness, arriving ahead of the evidence. So this week, notice where you are quietly begging instead of expecting, and when you hear the old line, "I never win anything," let it pass without agreeing. That single shift, from begging to expecting, is the doorway every fortunate story walks through. I no longer beg for my good. I expect it. The second key is this: the winner in you already knows her number long before the drawing happens. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the outer event is only ever a photograph developing from a negative that was exposed long ago in consciousness. So when someone wins, when someone receives the windfall that looks so sudden from the outside, it was not sudden at all. It was a private conviction, finally becoming visible. Think of the woman who tells everyone she simply has a feeling about a certain house, long before it is ever listed for sale. She walks past it on her evening walks. She pictures her own curtains in the windows. She speaks of it the way other people speak of things they already own, and when the sign finally appears in the yard, she is not shocked. She is only relieved that the outer world has finally caught up to what she settled inside herself months before. This is the same quiet mechanism behind every so-called stroke of luck. It is not that the house or the check or the opportunity chose her at random. It is that she had already been living, in feeling, as someone to whom such things naturally belong. Pause for a moment and pick one real area of your life right now, your income, your health, your home, and ask honestly what quiet number you have already agreed to. Because whatever number you have accepted as normal for you is the number that keeps showing up on your statements, on your paychecks, on your circumstances. It is not that the universe is withholding a bigger number. It is that you have not yet agreed to hold one. The winner does not know the literal digits before the drawing. She knows the feeling of already belonging to abundance, and that feeling writes the number for her. So this week, walk through your rooms, your mail, your ordinary errands, as though you were already the one the good news is addressed to. Let your posture, your small choices, your quiet expectancy, all agree with the number you actually wish to live inside. I already belong to the answer I am seeking. The third key is this: stop bargaining with chance. So many good people turn their longing into a transaction. They check the numbers 5 times. They rehearse what they would do if it came. They secretly promise the universe good behavior in exchange for a windfall. And all of this frantic bargaining is really just fear, wearing the costume of hope. Picture a woman named Ruth, who buys her ticket every Friday, on her way home from work. She tucks it into her wallet, and all weekend she checks it, folds it, unfolds it, whispers little promises over it. If this wins, I will finally be generous. I will finally be kind. As though the win must be earned through worry. By Sunday night she is exhausted, not from work, but from gripping something that was never hers to grip. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that fear is faith upside down. It is faith placed firmly in the wrong outcome. And a mind gripping this tightly cannot receive, because the hands are already full of anxiety. There is no room left for supply to land. It is not that grasping brings the good faster. It is that grasping is the very static that scrambles the signal. Notice, too, how the grip shows up quietly in ordinary places. The way you refresh your bank balance 5 times before noon. The way you replay a conversation hoping to have earned a yes. The universe is not moved by how tightly you hold on. It is moved by how calmly you let go. This week, when you notice yourself gripping, checking, rehearsing, gently open your hand, breathe, and simply say, "This, or something better, now manifests for me in peaceful and satisfactory ways." An open palm receives what a clenched fist can never hold. I release my grip and let my good arrive. The fourth key is this: the frightened old self must be allowed to dissolve before the fortunate self can step forward. And I want to be tender here, because this is not a teaching about literal death. It is about the false self, the anxious identity you built out of old lack and old disappointment, quietly loosening its grip so the true, abundant self underneath can finally breathe. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that most people are not actually living. They are haunting their own lives as the ghost of every old fear they ever agreed with, the version of you that flinches when the phone rings because it might be a bill, the version that says, "I am just not lucky," before the outcome has even been decided. That version has been running your household of thought for years, and it must be allowed to fade the way night fades when the sun simply rises. You do not fight night. You do not wrestle it to the ground. You simply let the light come, and the darkness has nowhere left to stand. Let me tell you about a woman I will call Marion. Marion had waited years for a certain sum of money to be settled on her, an inheritance long promised but slow in coming. And when the check finally arrived, she did something curious. She cashed it, and within the month it was gone. Not stolen, not lost, simply spent on small, anxious things. A new lock for a door that was never in danger. a stockpile of items she did not need, because underneath the check, nothing in her had actually changed. The frightened self, that believed money never stays for people like her, was still narrating the story, and so it wrote the ending it always writes. This is what Florence Scovel Shinn meant when she said the outer condition always mirrors the inner one. It is not that Marion was careless with money. It is that the money arrived into a house still furnished entirely with old fear. So this week, catch that old identity mid-sentence. When you hear yourself say things like, "I never win anything," or "good things do not happen to people like me," stop, right there, mid-breath, and say instead, "That was the old self speaking," and the old self does not have the final word here. It is not that you are being punished by an unlucky nature. It is that an old borrowed identity has been narrating your life and calling itself the truth. Florence Scovel Shinn would remind you that consciousness is elastic, that self-concept is not fixed in stone the way a mountain is fixed. It can be revised the way a sentence can be rewritten before it is ever spoken aloud. And every time you catch the frightened self mid-sentence and refuse to finish its story, you are letting a small piece of it dissolve. You are not becoming someone new so much as remembering someone true. Think of it like this: a lantern with a cracked glass does not need to be destroyed in anger. It simply needs to be set down gently while a new lantern is lit beside it, and slowly, quietly, without any struggle at all, the light you are actually living by shifts from the old lantern to the new one. The fortunate self was never absent. It was never even far away. It was simply buried under years of borrowed fear, layer upon layer of small, careless agreements you never meant to sign, but signed anyway, just by repeating them. And each honest catch, each gentle refusal to keep narrating lack, lets a little more light through the cracks. Notice, too, that this dissolving is not violent. It does not require you to hate the old self or shame it into leaving. Florence Scovel Shinn never taught struggle. She taught recognition. You simply see the old self clearly, name it kindly, and decline to feed it one more meal. The old self cannot survive in a house that keeps refusing to feed it. And Marion, had she known this, might have met that check with an entirely different inner house, waiting to receive it. One already furnished with the quiet expectation that money stays, that good remains, that she was the kind of woman fortune keeps returning to. I release the frightened self and let the true self rise. If this teaching is opening something in you, if you can feel that old borrowed self loosening its grip even a little, subscribe so the next teaching finds you when you need it most. This channel exists to keep that light burning for you week after week. The fifth key is this: do not chase the number, become the number. A person chasing a winning number is scattered, anxious, looking outside herself for a sign. She refreshes the results page. She rubs the ticket for luck. She asks the universe to hurry. And all of that scattered energy is really just fear dressed up as hope. Picture a woman named Ruth, who buys her ticket every single week on her way home from work. And every single week, she spends the drive rehearsing what she will do if it comes in. And every single week, when it does not come in, she feels the familiar sting of being overlooked again. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that Ruth was never actually playing against the machine. She was playing against her own settled belief. Because a woman who has become the feeling of abundance does not need the machine to confirm anything for her. She is already calm, already unhurried, already moving through her ordinary Tuesday, as though the good has already been decided. It is not that the number is hiding from Ruth somewhere out there in a spinning drum. It is that Ruth has been standing outside her own house, knocking on the door, when the door was never locked from that side. The kingdom of supply is within, not out there in chance. So stop scanning the horizon for your good, and start furnishing the room inside you where it will actually live. Decorate that inner room with expectancy, with quiet gratitude, with the settled feeling of already having. until it no longer matters what number is drawn, because you have already become the very thing every number was only ever pointing toward. I am already the answer I keep searching for. The sixth key is this. Your daily words are the tickets you keep buying, whether you know it or not. So let us walk through an ordinary day together. At 7 in the morning you wake and say, "Another Monday, here we go again." And that sentence buys a ticket. At 9 you tell a coworker, "I never catch a break." And that sentence buys another ticket. At noon you see a friend's good news online and think, "Of course that happens for her, not for me." And that thought buys a ticket too. By 3 in the afternoon the printer jams and you sigh, "This is just my luck." And another ticket leaves your hand without you even noticing the purchase. By 6 you are standing in a slow grocery line thinking, "Nothing ever goes smoothly for me." And that too is a ticket, quietly filed away. By evening you have bought a dozen tickets, every single one drawn from the same number, the number of lack. And then you lie in bed wondering why the drawing keeps coming back the same. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the spoken word is a seed planted in the soil of the subconscious, and the subconscious does not judge the seed. It does not sort the wise seeds from the foolish ones. It simply grows what is planted, faithfully, patiently, without opinion. It is not that the day was unlucky. It is that the day was narrated into being one small, careless sentence at a time. And here is the mercy hidden inside this teaching. If idle words can buy tickets to lack without your permission, then deliberate words can just as easily buy tickets to abundance with your full permission. The same soil that grew the weeds will just as willingly grow the wheat. So try a different day this week. Catch the small, careless sentences before they leave your mouth. Replace another Monday. Here we go again with something like, "Today carries good news for me." Replace, "I never catch a break" with "my break is already on its way." Replace "this is just my luck" with "something better is forming right now." You are not lying to yourself when you speak this way. You are simply refusing to keep buying tickets to a drawing you no longer wish to win, and choosing instead to fill your hours with words worth harvesting. My ordinary hours are lined with golden words. The seventh key is this, and it is the deepest one. So let us take it in 3 unfolding pieces. First, consider that time and chance, as the old verse called it, is not blind at all. It is law wearing a disguise. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that nothing in this universe happens outside of law. What looks random to the eye that cannot see consciousness is perfectly ordered to the eye that can. The sudden inheritance, the surprise promotion, the stranger who becomes the open door. None of it fell from an empty sky. It rose up out of a field quietly prepared long before it appeared. It is not that gifts are scattered at random among the wise and the foolish. It is that the universe answers a frequency, and frequency has no favorites, only receivers tuned finely enough to catch the signal. Think of an ordinary radio on a kitchen counter. The music was already moving through the air long before the dial found it. Your good is exactly like that music, already broadcasting, and the only question is whether your inner dial is tuned to receive it, or tuned, out of old habit, to static. Think too of a letter already written, addressed and stamped, waiting only for the correct address inside you to be uttered clearly enough for the carrier to find your door. The letter is not withheld out of unkindness. It is simply waiting on the address, and the address is your settled state. Second, consider that this law keeps an unseen ledger of every conviction you have ever fully believed. Not the wishes spoken half-heartedly, but the beliefs you settled into as fact. If you settled into "I am always overlooked," the ledger recorded it and the world arranged itself to prove you right. Picture a woman named Ruth, who applied for a position she quietly believed she would not get, telling her sister the night before, "They always pick someone else." And she was right. Not because the interviewers were unkind, but because a woman convinced of her own overlooking carries that conviction into the room in her voice. In the small ways she shrinks before anyone speaks. Picture 2, a small shopkeeper who opens his register, murmuring that business is slow this time of year. And business, faithfully, arranges itself to be slow, not because the season is against him, but because the ledger inside him has already written slow across the page. But here is the mercy inside this teaching. The ledger does not remember your past forever. It only reflects your current entry, which means the moment you sincerely change the entry, the account begins to shift. This is the same law the ancient writer glimpsed dimly, seeing the surface of the water without understanding the current beneath it. Third, consider what Florence Scovel Shinn called the trial hour, that stretch between the moment you plant the new word and the moment the harvest becomes visible. This is the hour that breaks most people, because the old evidence has not cleared and the new evidence has not arrived. And in that gap, the frightened self comes rushing back. See, nothing is changing. This is exactly where Ruth found herself after she caught her old sentence and began saying instead, "The right position is already finding me." Days passed. Her phone stayed quiet, and every quiet hour tempted her to take back the old defeated words. But this gap is not empty. It is being filled invisibly. The way a seed does its most important work while still buried and silent under the soil, the farmer does not dig up the seed each morning to check its progress. He trusts what he cannot yet see. Notice that the trial hour will almost always offer a convincing reason to quit, right before the shift becomes visible. This is simply the old entry defending itself one last time. It is not a sign the law has failed you. It is a sign the old page is being turned. Ruth kept watering hers, quietly, through several ordinary evenings that looked exactly like defeat, until the call finally came, from a company she had not even applied to yet, because the law was never tracking her single application. It was tracking her settled state. So hold these three pieces together. Chance is law. The law keeps an unseen ledger of your settled beliefs. And the trial hour between the planting and the harvest is not evidence against you. It is the very field where your harvest is quietly forming. I trust the unseen field while my harvest is forming. The eighth key is this. Once the good arrives, you must learn to guard it. Because so many stories of sudden fortune end in sudden loss. And it is not because the universe is cruel or fickle. It is because the person receiving the gift never actually changed their self-concept underneath it. They simply had an old scarcity identity, standing in a room suddenly full of money, and an identity that believes in lack will always find a way to return itself to lack. Think of a man I will call Walter. Walter worked a modest job for many years and always spoke of money the way you might speak of a shy animal that startles and runs at the slightest sound. One autumn, a small settlement came through. Nothing enormous, but far more than he had ever held at one time. And within days, a strange restlessness took hold of him. He could not simply let it sit quietly in his account. He felt an urgent need to spend it, to give large portions of it away, before anyone could ask him for it. To buy things he did not need, just so the number staring back at him would shrink into something familiar again. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this restlessness is the frightened self trying to return the household to the only temperature it has ever known. It is not that Walter was foolish with money. It is that comfort, for him, still lived inside smallness, and so the moment the gift outgrew his self-concept, some part of him worked quietly to shrink the gift back down to fit. Notice how differently this plays out for someone who has done the inner work. She receives good news, and her first instinct is not panic but gratitude. She does not rush to spend it away or bury it in fear. She simply says thank you, and treats it the way you would treat an honored guest arriving early. She sets a place for it. She speaks well of it to no one, and to everyone. She expects its relatives to visit soon after. This is what it means to welcome the good as a resident, instead of a visitor passing through. So this week, if any measure of good comes to you, however small, Resist the two old habits that quietly chase fortune away: the habit of clutching it in fear, and the habit of spending it in panic, just to feel it was never really there. Instead, thank it. Speak gently of it. Let your inner house grow one size larger to hold it comfortably, and trust that a home which honors its guest is a home that guest chooses to stay in. I welcome my good, and I know how to keep it. The ninth key is this, and it closes the circle we opened at the very start. You were never actually waiting on the numbers. The numbers were quietly waiting on you, waiting for you to become, in feeling and expectation, the very thing they represent. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that supply is not scarce. Only our awareness of it comes and goes. The drawing was never the source. It was only ever a messenger, and messengers only deliver what has already been addressed and sealed in consciousness. So release the old story that fortune is a stranger's game you were never invited to. You were invited the moment you were given the power to think and to speak. The secret energy behind every so-called lucky winner was never hidden in a machine spinning balls somewhere far away. It was hidden in plain sight the whole time, waiting quietly inside their own settled, expectant, grateful state. I was always invited, and so are you. My good was never far. It was only ever waiting on me. Here is the whole picture. Luck is not an accident. It is an alignment. The winner in you already knows her number before the world reveals it. Bargaining with chance only scrambles the very signal you are trying to send. The frightened old self must be allowed to quietly dissolve so the true self can finally step into the light. Becoming is always wiser than chasing. Your ordinary hours aligned with tickets bought by your own careless or careful words. Chance is law wearing a disguise, and it keeps an unseen ledger that answers to your settled beliefs. The trial hour is not proof against you, but the very field where your harvest forms in silence. And once the good arrives, it must be welcomed as a resident, and not treated like a passing guest. 9 keys, but really, they were always turns of the same single key. The recognition that your consciousness has been the number all along. If this teaching has stirred a hunger in you to go deeper, to carry these truths through every ordinary day, instead of only hearing them once, the Overflow Covenant was built as your daily companion for exactly this: a gentle, guided path of short teachings and practices to help these principles take root in your very own consciousness. It is available now for a simple investment of $33, fully backed by a 30-day guarantee, so there is truly nothing to lose and an entire new self-concept to gain. You will find the link in the description below, waiting quietly for you the way your own good has been waiting all along. So let us return once more to the words we opened with. Say them now in your own heart with me. I am tuned to the frequency of my rightful supply. Good fortune is drawn to the state I hold. My word is my wand. And remember, gently, always, the secret energy behind every fortunate life was never a hidden number out there in the dark. It was the quiet, settled knowing carried inside. And now, that same knowing is yours.